What if some of the most important places in human history were never supposed to survive? Across the world, archaeologists keep uncovering things that don't seem to fit the story we've been told. Entire cities buried beneath lakes, ancient monuments older than civilization itself, massive stone structures built by people who supposedly didn't have the technology to create them, and forgotten kingdoms that vanished so completely, only their ruins remain. The strange part is that these places are real. You can visit them, walk through them, touch the stones yourself, yet thousands of years later, many of their biggest secrets remain unanswered. Who built them? Why were they abandoned? And what happened to the people who once called these places home? Tonight we'll journey across some of the most mysterious ancient sites ever discovered, uncovering lost cities, hidden temples, forgotten tombs, and archaeological mysteries that continue to puzzle experts to this day. Before we begin, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. Now get comfortable, relax. The village that disappeared beneath a lake overnight. There is a place in northern Italy where a church tower rises straight out of the water. No church surrounds it. No village streets lead to it. No houses stand nearby. Just a lonely stone tower emerging from the surface of a lake, as if the rest of the world around it simply vanished. For first-time visitors, the sight feels almost impossible. Why would a church tower be standing in the middle of a lake? The answer begins with a village called Graun, and a decision that changed thousands of lives forever. Nestled in the Italian Alps near the borders of Austria and Switzerland, Graun was once a quiet mountain village. For centuries, families lived here beneath snow-covered peaks and beside clear alpine waters. Farmers worked the surrounding land. Children played in the narrow streets. Church bells echoed across the valley every morning and evening. Life moved slowly here. The mountains seemed eternal. The village seemed permanent. Generations were born, lived, and died without imagining that one day the entire community would disappear. But during the early 20th century, something began to change. Engineers started looking at the valley differently. Where residents saw homes and farmland, planners saw opportunity. The region contained several natural lakes and rivers, making it an ideal location for hydroelectric power. As demand for electricity increased, proposals emerged to create a much larger reservoir by combining existing bodies of water. On paper, the idea looked simple. Build a dam, raise the water level, generate electricity, support economic growth. To government officials and energy companies, the project represented progress. To the people of Graun, it represented disaster. Because the new reservoir would place their village directly in the path of rising water. At first, many residents believed the plan would never happen. Surely nobody would flood an entire community. Surely another solution could be found. But the years passed. The project moved forward. Arguments erupted. Petitions were signed. Residents protested. Families pleaded for their homes to be spared. Yet the construction continued. The future of Graun had already been decided. Then came 1950, the year everything changed. As the dam neared completion, water slowly began filling the valley. At first, the changes seemed manageable. Fields disappeared beneath the surface, then roads, then buildings. The water continued rising, day after day, week after week. Families watched as places they had known their entire lives slowly vanished. Gardens disappeared, barns disappeared, homes disappeared. Eventually the village itself began slipping beneath the water. People who had lived there for generations were forced to leave. Some relocated nearby. Others moved farther away. Entire neighborhoods were abandoned forever. By the time the flooding was complete, more than 100 homes had vanished beneath the newly created lake. Graun was gone, or at least most of it was, because one structure remained, the church bell tower. Built centuries earlier, the stone tower stood taller than everything around it. When the water finally stopped rising, the upper section remained visible above the surface. Everything else disappeared. The church itself was underwater, the streets were underwater, the village square was underwater, only the tower survived. And almost overnight it became one of the strangest landmarks in Europe. Visitors arriving at the lake often struggle to process what they're seeing. The tower looks misplaced, almost unnatural, like something forgotten by time. Many don't realize that beneath the water lies an entire lost community, a village frozen beneath the surface. The mystery only deepens during winter. When temperatures drop, the lake sometimes freezes solid. People can walk across the ice toward the tower. Standing beside it, surrounded by frozen water, feels surreal. It's easy to imagine the village still existing below. The roads, the houses, the memories, waiting silently beneath the ice. Over the years, local legends began to spread. Some claim that on quiet nights, the old church bells can still be heard ringing beneath the water. Others speak of shadows moving below the surface. There is no evidence for these stories, but they continue to survive because they capture something real, a sense that the village never completely disappeared. Because places are more than buildings. They are memories. They are communities. And even when the structures vanish, the stories often remain. Today, Lake Resia attracts visitors from around the world. Photographers arrive hoping to capture the famous tower rising from the water. Travellers stop to learn the history, and descendants of former residents continue sharing memories of the village that once stood there. Yet despite the attention, the site remains deeply haunting. A tower without a church, a landmark without a town, a reminder of a place that existed for centuries before disappearing beneath a lake. And beneath the calm waters of northern Italy, Gron still waits, hidden from view, preserved in memory, one of the most remarkable lost villages in Europe, a place that didn't fall to war, didn't vanish through natural disaster, but disappeared beneath a lake in a single generation, leaving only a lonely bell tower behind to tell its story, the ancient cemetery hidden above the clouds. High among the hills of Western Ireland, far from crowded cities and busy roads, lies one of the oldest and most mysterious burial landscapes in Europe. Known as Carrowkeel, the site sits atop a remote range of mountains overlooking lakes, valleys, and endless stretches of countryside. The view is breathtaking. On a clear day, the surrounding landscape seems to stretch forever. Yet people are not drawn here because of the scenery. They come because of what lies beneath the stones. Scattered across the mountaintops are dozens of ancient tombs. Some are hidden beneath grassy mounds. Others emerge from the landscape as circles of weathered stone. Together they form one of Ireland's oldest megalithic cemeteries, and for more than 5,000 years they have guarded secrets that archaeologists are still trying to understand. The journey to Carrowkeel is part of the mystery. Unlike many famous archaeological sites built beside rivers or near ancient cities, these tombs occupy isolated mountain ridges. Even today, reaching them requires effort. Visitors must climb winding paths through open countryside before the monuments finally appear. That raises an obvious question. Why would ancient people build a cemetery here? Thousands of years ago, moving heavy stones across rugged terrain would have been incredibly difficult. Yet generation after generation returned to these mountains. They carried stone, they built tombs, and they created a sacred landscape unlike anything else in Ireland. Researchers believe the cemetery dates back to around 3,500 BC. That means parts of Carrowkeel are older than Stonehenge, older than many Egyptian pyramids, and older than countless civilizations that would later shape history. The builders left behind no written records, no inscriptions, no explanations, only stone, and those stones tell a remarkable story. Many of the tombs contain long passages leading into burial chambers hidden within mounds. On certain days of the year, sunlight enters some of these chambers in carefully planned ways. The alignments appear intentional. The builders clearly understood the movement of the sun across the landscape. For them, these monuments may have represented more than simple graves. They may have connected the living with the dead, the earth with the sky, the present with eternity. One of the most fascinating features of Carrowkeel is its setting. The tombs are not hidden within valleys, they are positioned high above them. From the mountain ridges, ancient communities could see lakes, forests, and distant hills stretching across the horizon. The landscape itself may have held spiritual meaning. Many ancient cultures viewed elevated places as sacred. Mountains often became places where the human world and the spiritual world seemed closer together. Carrowkeel feels like such a place. Even now, the atmosphere is difficult to describe. The silence, the wind moving through the grass, the stones standing exactly where they stood thousands of years ago. Everything creates the feeling of stepping into another age. Excavations revealed that the tombs were used repeatedly over long periods of time. Human remains were placed within the chambers. ceremonial objects accompanied some burials. Evidence suggests these monuments played an important role in the lives of the communities that built them, yet many mysteries remain. Who were the people buried here? Why were certain individuals chosen for these tombs? What ceremonies took place on these mountaintops thousands of years ago? The answers have largely vanished with time, and perhaps that is what makes Carrowkeel so fascinating. Unlike castles, cities or temples, these monuments belong to a world that existed before recorded history. A world where stories were passed through memory rather than writing. A world whose beliefs survive only through stone. Over the centuries, countless generations passed beneath these hills. Kingdoms rose and fell, languages changed, entire cultures disappeared, yet the tombs remained, weathered by rain, covered by grass, watching over the Irish landscape. Today, archaeologists continue studying the cemetery, searching for clues hidden within the stones and surrounding terrain. Every discovery reveals another small piece of the puzzle, but many secrets remain untouched, and high above the valleys of Western Ireland, the ancient tombs of Carrowkeel continue standing beneath the sky. A cemetery older than history itself, a sacred landscape built by forgotten hands, and one of Europe's most remarkable prehistoric mysteries, the stone kingdom hidden beneath the island winds. On a quiet Mediterranean island off the coast of Spain stands one of Europe's oldest and most mysterious archaeological landscapes. At first glance, it doesn't look extraordinary. There are no towering pyramids, no giant palaces, no famous monuments known around the world. Instead, scattered across the countryside are massive stone structures built by a civilization that vanished long before the Romans arrived. A civilization that left behind no written records, no surviving kings, no detailed history, only stone. The site is known as Torralba and it may hold some of the greatest unanswered questions in the ancient Mediterranean. The ruins stand on Menorca, one of Spain's Balearic Islands. Today, the island is famous for its beaches, clear water, and peaceful landscapes. But thousands of years ago, a very different world existed here. Communities lived among stone settlements spread across the island. They built enormous monuments, created ceremonial spaces, and developed a culture that archaeologists now call the Talaiotic civilization. Yet despite decades of research, many aspects of their world remain mysterious. Torralba don Salor is one of the best places to explore that mystery. The moment visitors arrive, one structure immediately captures attention, a massive T-shaped monument known as a taula. The stone stands several meters high. One enormous vertical slab supports another placed horizontally across the top. Together they resemble a giant stone table, or perhaps a doorway, or perhaps something else entirely. And that uncertainty is exactly what fascinates archaeologists. Nobody knows with complete certainty why these structures were built. The taula dominates the ceremonial enclosure surrounding it. For thousands of years it has stood exposed to sun, rain, and Mediterranean winds. Empires came and went, entire civilizations disappeared. Yet the monument remained, silent, watching, waiting. Researchers believe the enclosure around the taula may have served religious purposes. Ceremonies likely took place here, offerings may have been made, communities may have gathered beneath the stars, excavations uncovered evidence suggesting ritual activity, including animal remains and artifacts connected to ceremonial practices. Yet the full story remains hidden. The builders left no written explanation behind. Their beliefs survive only through stone and archaeology, and the taula is not the only mystery. Across the site stand the remains of talaiots, large stone towers built from enormous blocks. These structures gave the civilization its modern name. From a distance, they resemble miniature fortresses rising above the landscape. Some researchers believe they served defensive purposes. Others think they functioned as symbols of authority or gathering places for the community. The truth may be a combination of several ideas. What is clear is that building them required tremendous effort. The people of Menorca moved massive stones without modern machinery. They organised labour, planned construction, and created monuments that survived for millennia. For an island society, the achievement was remarkable. Walking through Torralba don Salor today feels like stepping into a forgotten chapter of history. Stone walls divide ancient spaces. Collapsed structures emerge from grassy fields. Everywhere, traces of a vanished culture remain visible. Yet unlike Egypt or Greece, There are no ancient texts explaining what happened here. Much of the story must be reconstructed piece by piece. A fragment of pottery, a buried foundation, a ceremonial object. Each discovery reveals another small clue, but never the entire picture. One of the most intriguing questions involves the island itself. Why did the Talaiotic people invest so much effort into monumental architecture? Minorca was relatively isolated compared to major centres of the ancient world, yet evidence suggests the island maintained connections with distant cultures across the Mediterranean. Trade occurred, ideas travelled, influences arrived from abroad. The island was not as isolated as it first appears. Still, its civilization developed its own unique identity. And nowhere is that identity more visible than at Torobadon-Salor. As centuries passed and new peoples arrived, the Phoenicians expanded across Mediterranean, trade routes. The Romans eventually conquered the region. The old Talaiotic world gradually faded. Its traditions disappeared. Its language vanished. Its rulers were forgotten. Only the monuments remained. Today, the giant tower still stands at the centre of the site. The stone towers still overlook the landscape, and the winds of Minorca continue moving through ruins built by people whose names have been lost to time. A forgotten stone kingdom, a mysterious ceremonial centre, and one of the most fascinating prehistoric sites in all of Europe, the stone tomb that captures the sun. On a windswept island north of mainland Scotland stands a monument older than the pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge, older than most civilizations people learn about in school. At first glance, it doesn't appear particularly impressive. A grassy mound rises gently from the landscape. From a distance, it looks almost like a natural hill. Many visitors could easily walk past it without realizing what lies hidden beneath. But inside that mound is one of the most extraordinary structures ever built by prehistoric people, a place known as Maeshowe, and for more than 5,000 years, it has guarded one of Europe's greatest ancient mysteries. The monument stands on Orkney, a group of islands surrounded by the cold waters of the North Atlantic. The landscape feels ancient. Rolling fields stretch toward the horizon. Powerful winds sweep across the countryside. And scattered throughout the islands are traces of people who lived here thousands of years ago. Maeshowe is among the most remarkable of them. The structure was built around 2800 BC. That means it already stood for centuries before the first stones of Stonehenge were raised. Yet even after thousands of years, its engineering continues to astonish archaeologists. The entrance appears surprisingly small. A narrow stone passage disappears into darkness beneath the mound. Visitors must bend slightly as they move through the corridor. The tunnel stretches forward for dozens of feet. Then suddenly, the chamber opens. A large stone room appears at the heart of the monument. Massive slabs form the walls. Carefully fitted stones create the interior. Small side chambers branch from the main room. Everything feels deliberate. Everything feels planned. And perhaps most remarkably, it has remained standing for over 5 millennia. The builders left behind no written explanation. No records survive describing how the structure was constructed. Yet one thing is obvious. They possessed extraordinary knowledge, not only of engineering, but of the sky itself, because Maeshowe was designed to interact with sunlight in a very specific way. Every year during the winter solstice, something remarkable happens. As the sun sets on the shortest days of the year, its light enters the narrow passageway. The beam slowly travels through the corridor and reaches the central chamber deep within the monument. For a brief moment, the heart of the tomb fills with golden light. The effect is stunning, especially when considering that the alignment was planned thousands of years ago. The builders understood exactly where the sun would be, exactly how the light would move, and exactly how to capture it. For archaeologists, the alignment suggests that Maeshowe was far more than a simple tomb. It may have been a place of ceremony, a place connected to seasonal cycles, a place where life, death, and the movement of the heavens came together. The monument becomes even more mysterious when considering its location. Orkney sits far north, where winter days become short and dark. The return of sunlight after the longest nights of the year would have carried enormous significance. Perhaps the winter solstice represented renewal. Perhaps it symbolized rebirth. Or perhaps its meaning has been lost forever. The stones remain silent. One of the strangest chapters in Maeshowe's story came thousands of years after it was built. During the Viking Age, Norse explorers arrived in Orkney. At some point they entered the ancient monument, and unlike its original builders, the Vikings left something behind. Words. The walls of Maeshowe contain one of the largest collections of Viking runic inscriptions found anywhere in the world. Visitors today can still see messages carved into the stone centuries ago. Some are serious, some are surprisingly casual. One inscription essentially boasts that the writer carved the runes. Another mentions treasure. Together they create an unusual connection between two very different worlds, a prehistoric monument and Viking explorers separated by thousands of years. Yet even the Vikings did not fully understand the structure they entered. The original builders were already ancient history to them. The mystery had begun long before they arrived. For centuries afterward, Maeshowe remained part of local legends. Stories spread about hidden treasure, about spirits, about ancient powers connected to the mound. Such stories emerged naturally. The monument feels mysterious. Even modern visitors often describe a strange atmosphere inside. The silence, the darkness, the knowledge that people stood here 5,000 years ago. Everything creates a sense of connection to a distant past. Today, archaeologists consider Maeshowe one of the greatest prehistoric monuments in Europe, not because of gold, not because of lost treasure, but because of the extraordinary skill and knowledge hidden within its stones. A monument built before recorded history, a tomb aligned with the sun, and a place that continues to puzzle and inspire everyone who enters its ancient chamber. 5,000 years later, the winter sunlight still finds its way inside. Just as the builders intended, the tracks that shouldn't exist. Scattered across the islands of Malta are strange lines carved into solid rock. At first glance, they don't look particularly mysterious. They resemble tracks, almost like the grooves left behind by wagon wheels. But the longer archaeologists study them, the stranger they become. Because nobody knows who made them. Nobody knows exactly when they were made. And perhaps most puzzling of all, many of them seem to lead absolutely nowhere. These marks are known as the Malta Cart Ruts, and they remain one of Europe's most enduring archaeological mysteries. The islands themselves sit in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea between Europe and North Africa. For thousands of years, civilizations have crossed these waters. Phoenicians, Romans, Arabs, knights, empires came and went. Yet the cart ruts appear to be much older than many of them. The grooves can be found across different parts of Malta and Gozo. Some run parallel to each other like railway tracks. Others split apart unexpectedly. Some intersect and cross one another. A few simply stop at cliff edges overlooking the sea, as if whatever created them continued straight into the water. That detail has fascinated researchers for generations, because if these were transportation routes, why would they end so abruptly? The tracks vary in depth. Some are shallow scratches, others cut deeply into the limestone bedrock. In certain places they appear so worn that they look as though something incredibly heavy passed over them again and again. The obvious explanation is that ancient carts created them. After all, they look remarkably similar to wheel ruts. But that theory immediately creates new problems. The spacing between tracks is often inconsistent. Some grooves are too narrow, others are too wide, and many sections would have been extremely difficult for wheeled vehicles to navigate. The terrain simply doesn't make sense. Over the years, numerous theories emerged. Some researchers suggested the grooves were formed by sledges dragging heavy loads across soft limestone. Others proposed that they were connected to quarrying activities. Ancient builders may have transported massive stone blocks using routes worn into the landscape over centuries. The explanation sounds reasonable, yet even that theory leaves important questions unanswered, because many of the tracks appear in locations far removed from major quarry sites, and some follow routes that seem impractical for transporting anything at all. The mystery becomes even stranger beneath the sea. Divers exploring waters off the Maltese coast discovered what appear to be additional cart ruts extending underwater. Some continue toward areas that would have been dry land thousands of years ago when sea levels were lower. The discovery fueled even more speculation. Could some of these tracks be older than previously thought? Could they date back to periods before parts of the coastline disappeared beneath the sea? Researchers continue debating the answer. The timing remains uncertain, and without definitive evidence, the mystery survives. What makes the cart ruts particularly fascinating is their connection to Malta's prehistoric past. The islands contain some of the oldest freestanding stone structures on Earth. Ancient temple builders created monumental sites here thousands of years before the rise of classical Greece, long before Rome existed, long before most famous civilizations emerged. The people of prehistoric Malta clearly possessed remarkable engineering abilities. Could the cart ruts somehow be connected to them? Perhaps. But proving that connection has proven difficult. The tracks reveal almost nothing about the people who made them. No inscriptions accompany them. No written records survive. No ancient texts explain their purpose. Only the grooves remain, cut into stone, silent, waiting. Visitors exploring Malta today often encounter the cart ruts unexpectedly. One moment they are walking through open countryside. The next they notice parallel lines stretching across the rock beneath their feet. Some tracks vanish into the distance, others disappear beneath vegetation. Many look exactly as they did centuries ago. The effect is surprisingly powerful, because unlike ruins or monuments, the cart ruts feel unfinished, like evidence left behind by an unknown process, a puzzle whose missing pieces never survived. Even modern technology has failed to provide a definitive answer. Archaeologists mapped the tracks, measured them, compared different sites, studied the surrounding geology. Yet consensus remains elusive. Theories continue competing with one another, and the mystery endures. Perhaps one day a new discovery will finally explain them. Perhaps evidence still lies buried somewhere beneath the Maltese landscape. Or perhaps the full story vanished long ago with the people who created the grooves in the first place. Until then, the cart ruts remain one of Europe's strangest archaeological puzzles. Ancient tracks crossing an island, lines carved into stone, and a mystery that continues to challenge everyone who encounters it. Because thousands of years later, the same question remains. Who made them, and why? The giant stone tomb, built for forgotten giants. In the quiet countryside of western France stands a monument so large that early visitors struggle to believe ordinary people could have built it. Known as the Dolmen de Bagneux, it is one of the largest prehistoric stone tombs in Europe, and even today, standing beside it can feel slightly unreal. Massive stone slabs form a long chamber stretching across the landscape. Some of the stones weigh dozens of tons. Others stand taller than a person. Together they create a structure that has survived for thousands of years, long before castles, long before cathedrals, long before France even existed. The monument was already ancient. The Dolmen de Bagneux sits near the town of Saumur in the Loire Valley. At first glance, it appears surprisingly simple. A row of giant upright stones supports enormous capstones overhead. There are no decorations, no statues, no inscriptions explaining its purpose, just stone, and a lot of it. For centuries, local people stared at the monument and wondered how it came to be. Many believed giants built it. Others imagined forgotten races with incredible strength. The explanation may sound strange today, but for people living hundreds of years ago, it made sense. After all, how could prehistoric communities move stones this large without modern machinery? Even archaeologists continue admiring the engineering involved. The tomb dates back roughly 5,000 years. That means it was constructed during a period when metal tools were rare or non-existent in many parts of Europe. Yet somehow the builders quarried enormous slabs, transported them across the landscape, and positioned them with remarkable precision. The effort must have required planning on a massive scale. Large groups of people would have worked together. Resources had to be organised. Knowledge had to be shared between generations. The monument was not the work of a few individuals. It was the work of an entire community. But why build it? That question remains at the heart of the mystery. Researchers believe the structure served as a collective tomb. Human remains were once placed within the long stone chamber. Generations may have been buried here over extended periods of time. The monument likely held deep spiritual significance. For the people who built it, death was not simply an ending. It was part of a larger relationship between ancestors, community, and the landscape itself. The size of the structure suggests that those buried here were important. Not necessarily kings, not necessarily rulers, but individuals whose memory mattered enough to justify one of the largest stone constructions of its era. Walking through the site today, it is difficult not to think about the people responsible for it. Their names are gone. Their language vanished thousands of years ago. Their beliefs survive only in fragments, yet the monument remains. The stones continue telling a story even when the details have been lost. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Dolmen de Bagneux is its survival. Many prehistoric monuments disappeared over time. Some were dismantled for building materials. Others collapsed through natural erosion. Yet this structure endured. Storms passed overhead. Empires rose and fell. Wars transformed the surrounding region. Still, the giant stones remained standing, almost as if they were determined to outlast history itself. The monument also belongs to a much larger tradition. Across Western Europe, ancient communities built megalithic tombs using enormous stones. Some appear in Ireland, others in Britain, others throughout France and the Iberian Peninsula. These structures reveal that prehistoric societies were far more organised and capable than people once believed. They understood engineering, they coordinated large projects, and they created monuments designed to survive for generations. The Dolmen de Bagneux may be one of the finest examples. Yet despite everything archaeologists have learned, important mysteries remain. Who exactly was buried here? Why was this particular location chosen? What ceremonies took place around the monument thousands of years ago? And how did people without modern technology move stones weighing tens of tons? The answers remain hidden somewhere in the distant past. Perhaps they always will, but standing beneath the enormous capstones today, it becomes easy to understand why legends grew around the monument. The structure feels timeless, the stones feel impossibly large, and the silence surrounding them feels ancient. A giant tomb built by forgotten hands, a monument older than recorded history, and one of Europe's most remarkable prehistoric mysteries, the stone tomb hidden beside the ancient coast. On the rugged northwest coast of Ireland, where powerful Atlantic waves crash against rocky shores and mist drifts across green hills, stands one of the country's oldest and most mysterious monuments. Known as Creevy Court Tomb, the structure has watched over the landscape for more than 5,000 years. Long before castles appeared across Ireland, long before written history, and long before anyone imagined the modern world, the tomb was already ancient. Today, the monument sits quietly among open fields not far from the sea. At first glance, it resembles a collection of weathered stones arranged in an unusual pattern. But a closer look reveals something far more remarkable. A large open court leads toward a long stone chamber hidden within a cairn. The design feels deliberate, ceremonial, almost inviting, as if the builders intended people to gather here before entering the tomb itself, and perhaps they did. Creevy belongs to a type of monument known as a court tomb. These structures were built by some of Ireland's earliest farming communities thousands of years ago. Unlike simple graves, they appear to have served multiple purposes. The open forecourt may have hosted gatherings, rituals or ceremonies connected to the dead. People likely came here not only to bury their ancestors, but also to remember them, to honour them, and perhaps to communicate with them in ways now lost to history. The builders left behind no written records, no names, no explanations, only stone. Yet those stones reveal an extraordinary amount of effort. Massive slabs were transported into position and carefully arranged to create chambers that have survived for millennia. Without modern tools, without machines, without metal cranes, everything had to be accomplished through human labour and ingenuity. The result remains standing today. One of the most fascinating aspects of Creevy is its location. The tomb overlooks a landscape of hills, coastline and distant mountains. For ancient communities, such places may have carried spiritual significance. The monument was not hidden away. It was placed where people could see it, where generations would pass by and remember, where the dead remained connected to the living world. Excavations at the site uncovered evidence that the tomb was used repeatedly over long periods of time. Human remains were discovered inside. Artifacts were found among the stones. Researchers learned that the structure played an important role in the lives of the communities who built it. Yet its story did not end there. Thousands of years after the tomb was constructed, other people returned. Evidence suggests that during the Iron Age, parts of the monument may have been reused. A place already ancient became useful once again. Different generations found new meaning within the same stones. The tomb continued evolving long after its original builders were gone. That continuity is remarkable. Few places remain important for such a long span of time. Most settlements disappear. Most buildings collapse. Yet Creevy Keel endured, century after century, millennium after millennium. The Atlantic storms came and went, kingdoms rose and fell, languages changed. Still, the monument remained. Local legends eventually grew around sites like this throughout Ireland. Ancient tombs were often associated with spirits, hidden worlds, and forgotten peoples. Communities living nearby understood that these structures belonged to a distant past, a past so old that its creators had become mysterious even to them. And perhaps that mystery still survives. Because despite decades of archaeological research, many questions remain unanswered. Who exactly was buried here? What ceremonies took place within the stone court? Why was this location chosen above countless others, and what did the builders believe awaited them beyond death? The stones do not answer. They simply remain, silent witnesses to thousands of years of history. Today, visitors walking through Creevy Keel often describe a feeling of calm. The monument feels isolated from modern life. The surrounding landscape seems unchanged, and for a moment, it becomes possible to imagine the people who gathered here 5,000 years ago, standing in the same place, looking at the same hills, listening to the same wind, a sacred tomb beside the sea, a monument older than history, and one of Ireland's most remarkable prehistoric mysteries, the giant horse carved into a mountain. High on a hillside in southern England, there is a giant figure so large that it can only truly be seen from the sky. It stretches across the landscape like a message left behind by another world. Its shape is simple, a horse, but not an ordinary horse. Its body is formed from long white lines cut directly into the hillside. Its legs appear to be running. Its head stretches forward as if frozen in motion. For centuries, people have stared at it and asked the same question. Who made it? And why? Known as the Uffington White Horse, it is one of Britain's greatest archaeological mysteries. Because unlike castles, temples, or tombs, this monument is not built from stone. It is carved into the land itself. The horse stands on a chalk hillside in Oxfordshire. From nearby, it can be surprisingly difficult to understand what you're looking at. The figure is simply too large. Only from a distance, or high above the landscape, does its shape become clear. And when it does, the sight is unforgettable. The horse appears almost alive. Its design is elegant, minimal, modern-looking. In fact, many visitors are shocked when they learn how old it may be. For generations, people debated its age. Some believed it was created during the Middle Ages. Others thought it might be connected to ancient legends. Then archaeologists began investigating. The results were astonishing. Scientific studies suggested the figure was created more than 3,000 years ago, possibly during the Bronze Age. That would make it one of the oldest landscape artworks in Europe. Thousands of years before modern nations existed, thousands of years before written English, the horse was already running across the hillside. The discovery created a new mystery. Why would Bronze Age people create something this enormous? Constructing the figure required tremendous effort. Workers had to cut trenches into the hillside and fill them with bright white chalk. The design had to be planned carefully. The proportions had to work across a huge distance, and perhaps most importantly, the figure required constant maintenance. Without regular care, grass would eventually cover it. That means generation after generation returned to the site, cleaning it, repairing it, preserving it. The horse clearly mattered. But why? Researchers have proposed many theories. Some believe it represented a tribal symbol visible across the surrounding landscape. Others think it had religious significance. The horse may have been connected to beliefs about power, fertility, or the natural world. There is even the possibility that it marked important territory, a giant symbol announcing the presence of a community. The truth remains uncertain. The people who created it left no written explanation. Only the horse remains, and perhaps that mystery is part of its appeal. The landscape surrounding the monument adds another layer to the story. The figure overlooks rolling hills, valleys, and ancient pathways that have existed for thousands of years. Nearby stands a place known as Dragon Hill. According to local legend, St. George defeated a dragon there. Another nearby earthwork known as Uffington Castle crowns the hilltop. Together the area feels ancient, almost timeless, as though every hill contains another forgotten story. One of the most remarkable things about the White Horse is its survival. 3,000 years is an incredibly long time. Entire civilizations have appeared and disappeared during that period. Empires rose, empires fell, languages changed, wars reshaped nations, yet somehow the horse endured, partly because local communities continued caring for it. Historical records describe people gathering periodically to clean and restore the figure. Without those efforts, the horse would have vanished long ago beneath vegetation. Instead, it survived into the modern age. Today, visitors from around the world come to see it. Many expect a simple archaeological site. What they discover is something much stranger. A giant image hidden within the landscape itself. A monument that can only truly be appreciated from afar. And a mystery that has remained unsolved for thousands of years. Even now, archaeologists continue studying the figure and its surrounding landscape. New discoveries occasionally emerge, new theories appear, yet no explanation has completely solved the puzzle. Why a horse? Why this location? And what message were its creators trying to leave behind? Perhaps only the builders knew, and their answer vanished thousands of years ago. But the horse remains, still racing across the hillside, still watching over the English countryside, and still carrying one of the oldest mysteries in Britain, the stone sanctuary older than civilization. In the dry hills of southeastern Turkey lies a place that should not exist, a place so old that it was built before cities, before kingdoms, before writing, before the invention of the wheel. Yet somehow, thousands of years ago, people gathered here and created one of the most remarkable stone complexes ever discovered. The site is known as Karahan Tepe, and it is forcing archaeologists to rethink the story of human civilization itself. For generations, historians believed that large monuments appeared only after people settled into cities. The logic seemed simple. First came farming, then villages, then organised societies capable of constructing monumental architecture. But discoveries in this region have challenged that idea, because Karahan Tepe was built at a time when much of humanity still lived as hunter-gatherers, and yet the people who came here created something extraordinary. The landscape surrounding the site feels ancient. Rolling hills stretch toward the horizon, rocky ridges rise above dry plains. At first glance, there seems to be nothing unusual about the area, but beneath the ground, hidden for thousands of years, lay an enormous ceremonial complex. When archaeologists began excavating, they discovered stone pillars emerging from the earth, then more pillars, then entire structures. The deeper they dug, the more mysterious the site became. Many of the pillars were carefully carved from limestone. Some stood taller than a person. Others featured strange designs and symbols whose meanings remain uncertain. Unlike later civilizations, the builders left behind no written explanation. No names, no records, only stone and questions. One of the most fascinating discoveries involved a circular chamber cut directly into the bedrock. Inside stood rows of stone pillars arranged with incredible precision. The layout appeared intentional, ceremonial, almost theatrical, as though people gathered here for important rituals whose purpose has long been forgotten. Then archaeologists uncovered something even stranger, a large stone head emerging from the earth, human figures carved into pillars, animal imagery appearing throughout the site. Every discovery seemed to suggest that Karahan Tepe was more than a settlement. It was a place of belief, a place where symbols mattered, a place where ancient communities came together for reasons we still do not fully understand. The mystery deepens when researchers consider the age of the site. Karahan Tepe dates back more than 11,000 years. That is difficult to comprehend. Entire civilizations separate us from the people who built it. The pyramids of Egypt were still thousands of years in the future. Stonehenge did not exist. Most famous ancient monuments had not even been imagined. Yet the builders of Karahan Tepe were already shaping stone and creating monumental spaces. How they organised such projects remains one of archaeology's biggest questions. Large construction efforts require planning, leadership, cooperation, and a shared purpose. Something motivated people to gather here and invest enormous amounts of labour into building the complex. But what? Religion? Ceremony? Social gatherings? Perhaps all of them. No one knows for certain. Karahan Tepe is often compared to nearby Göbekli Tepe, another famous prehistoric site that transformed archaeological thinking. Together, the two locations suggest that sophisticated ceremonial centres existed much earlier than once believed. Instead of civilization creating monuments, perhaps monuments helped create civilization. Perhaps gathering in places like these encouraged cooperation between communities. Perhaps shared beliefs laid the foundations for everything that came later. It is a fascinating possibility, and one that continues generating debate among researchers. Walking through the site today, visitors encounter rows of ancient pillars emerging from the earth. Some remain partially buried, others stand exposed beneath the Turkish sun. The atmosphere feels different from later archaeological sites. There are no grand palaces, no royal tombs, no evidence of kings ruling over vast populations. Instead, there is something older, something closer to the beginning, a glimpse into a chapter of human history that is still largely unknown. And perhaps that is what makes Karahan Tepe so remarkable. The site does not merely tell us about an ancient culture, it challenges assumptions about how civilization began. Every excavation reveals new clues, every discovery raises new questions, and much of the complex remains buried beneath the ground. What else is waiting there? How large was the site originally? What ceremonies took place among these pillars more than 11,000 years ago? For now, the answers remain hidden. But in the hills of southeastern Turkey, archaeologists continue uncovering one of humanity's oldest mysteries, a stone sanctuary older than civilization, a place built before history, and a reminder that the ancient world may be far stranger than we ever imagined. The giant tombs built before the pyramids. In western France, hidden among quiet fields and rolling countryside, stands a group of monuments so old that they were already ancient when the first pyramids rose from the sands of Egypt. Most people have never heard of them. There are no towering statues, no golden treasures, no legendary kings whose names survive through history. Yet these structures may be among the most important prehistoric monuments ever built. They are known as the Tumulus of Bugon, and for more than 5,000 years they have guarded the remains of a forgotten world. At first glance, the site appears deceptively simple. Large grassy mounds rise gently from the landscape. Some resemble small hills, others look like natural formations shaped by time, but appearances can be misleading. Beneath these mounds lie enormous stone tombs constructed by some of Europe's earliest farming communities. The builders lived during a period so distant that no written records exist. No stories survive, no names remain, only stone and mystery. The oldest sections of Bugon date back to around 4,700 BC. That makes them older than Stonehenge, older than many of Egypt's earliest pyramids, and older than countless civilizations that would later dominate history. The age alone is remarkable. But what truly fascinates archaeologists is the scale of construction. The builders moved enormous stones weighing several tons. They organized labor, planned complex structures, and created monuments designed to endure for generations. This was not the work of a small family group. It required an entire community, perhaps several communities working together. The site contains multiple tumuli, each with its own design. Inside, some are long stone chambers. Others contain passageways leading deep beneath the mound. Massive slabs form walls and ceilings. Everywhere, evidence of careful planning can be seen. The people who built these tombs clearly possessed sophisticated knowledge of construction. Yet they lived thousands of years before metal cranes, engines, or modern machinery. How exactly they achieved such feats remains one of the site's enduring mysteries. Archaeologists believe the tombs served as burial places for important members of society. Human remains have been discovered within several chambers, but Bugon was likely more than a cemetery. The effort invested in these monuments suggests something deeper. Perhaps they were symbols of identity, places where communities gathered to honour ancestors, or sacred spaces connecting the living with the dead. One of the most intriguing aspects of Bugon is the sheer length of time the site remained important. Some tombs were modified and expanded over centuries. Generation after generation returned to the same location. That continuity reveals how significant the place must have been. People remembered it, protected it, added to it. Long after the original builders were gone, standing among the monuments today, it is difficult not to imagine the ceremonies that once took place here. Groups gathering around newly completed tombs, families honouring their ancestors, communities coming together beneath the open sky. The details are lost, but the stones remain, and they suggest a society far more organised than people once believed. For many years, prehistoric communities were often portrayed as simple groups struggling to survive. Sites like Bougon tell a different story. These people planned ambitious projects. They coordinated labour on a large scale, and they created monuments capable of surviving thousands of years. The tombs challenge assumptions about the distant past. They reveal intelligence, engineering, and a desire to leave something permanent behind. Over the centuries, weather slowly reshaped the landscape. Grass covered the mounds, soil accumulated around the stones, the monuments blended into their surroundings. Many people passed by without realizing what lay beneath their feet. Then archaeology brought the site back into the light. Excavations revealed chambers hidden within the mounds. Artifacts emerged from the earth, and researchers began piecing together the story of one of Europe's oldest monumental burial complexes. Yet many questions remain unanswered. Who exactly were the people buried here? Why was this location chosen? What beliefs inspired such enormous effort? And what stories disappeared when their civilization faded from memory? The answers may never be fully known, but that uncertainty only adds to the fascination. Because beneath the quiet fields of France stand monuments older than recorded history. Tombs built before the pyramids, stone chambers raised by forgotten hands, and one of the oldest archaeological mysteries in Europe. A place where the distant past still waits beneath the earth. The first mountain built by human hands. In the deserts of southern Iraq, where the great civilizations of Mesopotamia first emerged, lie the remains of a structure that changed human history forever. Today, only fragments survive. Broken mud brick, ancient foundations, weathered ruins rising from the earth. To an ordinary visitor, the site might not seem particularly impressive, but beneath those ruins lies the foundation of something extraordinary. A monument so important that it inspired thousands of years of temple construction across the ancient world. It is known as the Anu Ziggurat, and it may represent one of humanity's earliest attempts to build a mountain. Not a natural mountain, a man-made one, a sacred place designed to connect earth and sky. The story begins in the ancient city of Uruk. More than 5,000 years ago, Uruk was becoming one of the world's first true cities. People gathered behind its walls, trade expanded, technology advanced, and society began changing in ways never seen before. Many historians consider Uruk one of the birthplaces of civilization itself. This was where some of humanity's earliest urban experiments unfolded, and at the centre of the city stood a sacred district dedicated to powerful gods. Among them was Anu, the sky god, one of the most important deities in Mesopotamian belief. To honour him, the people of Uruk constructed a massive elevated platform. Layer upon layer of mud brick was stacked together until an artificial hill rose above the surrounding city. Upon that platform stood a temple, a place where priests performed rituals and ceremonies dedicated to the heavens. The structure was unlike anything that had existed before. For thousands of years, humans had built homes and villages. Now they were creating monumental architecture on a completely different scale. The platform elevated the temple high above ordinary life. From below, the building would have dominated the skyline, visible from great distances, a symbol of both religious devotion and civic power. Archaeologists believe the Anu Ziggurat formed part of a much larger ceremonial complex. Generations of builders expanded and modified the site over centuries. Each generation added something new, a larger platform, a new temple, additional structures. The sacred centre continued growing as the city itself expanded. What makes the site so fascinating is its age. The earliest stages date back to a period when large cities were still a relatively new idea. Writing was only beginning to appear. Complex governments were still developing. Yet the people of Uruk already possessed the ability to organise enormous construction projects. Thousands of workers may have contributed to the effort. Mud bricks had to be manufactured, materials transported, plans coordinated. Everything required leadership and cooperation. The project reveals just how sophisticated early Mesopotamian society had become. One of the most remarkable features of the Anu Ziggurat is what it inspired. Later civilizations across Mesopotamia would construct increasingly massive ziggurats. These stepped temple towers became symbols of ancient cities. Some rose high above the landscape, dominating entire regions. But many historians believe the roots of that tradition can be traced back to places like Uruk. The idea began here, a sacred structure elevated toward the sky, a bridge between humans and gods, a mountain built by human hands. The symbolism was powerful. In a landscape dominated by flat plains, height carried meaning. The higher a temple stood, the closer it seemed to the heavens. Religious ceremonies performed atop the platform may have reinforced that connection. Priests ascending the structure were not simply climbing stairs, they were symbolically moving closer to the divine. At least that was the belief. Yet despite its importance, much about the Anu ziggurat remains uncertain. The builders left behind clues, but not complete explanations. Archaeologists continue studying the site, searching for evidence of how rituals were performed and how the complex evolved over time. Each excavation reveals another piece of the puzzle, yet many mysteries remain buried beneath the soil of ancient Uruk. As centuries passed, new rulers arrived, new temples appeared, new cities rose across Mesopotamia. The original structures gradually aged, walls crumbled, mud brick, eroded. The great platform slowly became part of the landscape once again, but its influence never disappeared, because the idea survived. The concept of building monumental sacred towers continued shaping civilizations for thousands of years. And it all began here. Today, little remains of the towering structure that once dominated Uruk. Yet even in ruin, the site remains extraordinary, a foundation beneath the foundations of civilization. A sacred monument built before most of history had even begun, and one of the earliest examples of humanity's desire to reach toward the sky. The first mountain built by human hands, and a reminder of just how ambitious the world's earliest cities truly were.